hard not to think that Mississippi State shouldn't be 3-0 heading into SEC play at home against LSU this Saturday, but it is what it is, as they say in the scorebook, at 2-1 following a very disappointing loss to Memphis on a freakish play. If you have yet to see it, you got to check it out. Calvin Austin, Memphis, just look it up, Google it. It's there, a punt return like few in the history of college football. Mississippi State falls to Memphis. We got Daniel Black on the line from MSU Bulldog Blitz, so join him and the rest of the staff there and his work on MSU Bulldog Blitz. Hey, Daniel, how's it going?
Pretty good, Mark. Glad to be here. Thanks for the reminder, but I guess we have to do that.
Did you really need a reminder?
No. I've been reminded of it way too many times, especially since I'm from Memphis, so I haven't heard the end of it.
Well, if you're going to be in the highlights nationally, you would rather be in the highlights for other reasons, but it was something to behold. Mississippi State with about 5 minutes left, punting to Memphis, going to pin them down inside the 5-yard line. Thought the ball was downed. There was some controversy, and maybe you'll have a little bit more light to shed on this situation regarding the MSU players on special teams thinking that the official had signaled that the ball was down at the 4 or 5 yard line, and Calvin Austin, a Memphis special teams punt returner, just picks up the ball, races 95 yards for a touchdown, pretty much sealed the game. But I know that there were some questions raised to Mike Leach after the game, and some members of the media had stated there was controversy, and one of the reasons all those Mississippi State players reacted the way they did was they thought that they had received this signal from the official that the ball was dead.
Exactly right. The official who was closest to the player who downed the ball started waving his arms into a beanbag on the ground. Now, of course, the Memphis side of it is the Mississippi State player did not give the ball to the official, and then Calvin, but everyone else except for Calvin Austin thought the play was dead. Mike Leach post-game was told or said to the media that he had no idea that the officials waved his arms, and he was not aware that about any potential ruling that the official gave until a media told him in the post-game. And then yesterday, in Mike Leach's weekly press conference, he was told that the play and some subsequent plays, because it was not just the punt return, there was controversy on Mississippi State ended up scoring on the next possession, and there was a controversy on the ensuing onside kick. I mean, there were multiple plays. The punt return is the biggest one, but there were multiple plays after the fact that could have swung the game in State's favor as well. But Mike Leach was told that the play was reviewed by an official, even though that the Southeastern Conference in their official statement that was released on Saturday night after the game said that the play should have been reviewed. I mean, it was just a calamity of epic proportions. It would have been very interesting to see if that official who actually waved his arms, I mean, it was obvious that he just sort of said, I guess I didn't. You know, he didn't really consult with his fellow officials after the fact. He just sort of let it happen. So, the thing is, State probably should not have been in that situation in the first place, but they should not have been in a situation where the officials dictated the outcome of the game. But that's what happened, and it's just one of the craziest things you'll ever see. And whichever side you're on, you have to admit that it was just pure insanity and to be quite just officiating incompetence.
Sounds like it. It sounds like it. And that was an SEC officiating crew, correct?
Yes, it was, which is why the SEC made a statement on Saturday night basically saying, yeah, we screwed up. So
that's a tough one to take. That is
Absolutely.
a tough one to take. If it were the last play of the game, you could say, well, that officiating mistake led directly to the victory. Therefore, we know that Mississippi State would have won the game. But there's 5 minutes left. They're down by 4. Who knows what would have happened? They would have had Memphis pinned down at the 4 or 5 yard line. You throw up your hands. It just basically erased Mississippi's chance of legitimately winning the game. Took them down to 2 scores down with 5 minutes left. That's a difficult comeback to make. It's made all the time, but the probability just skyrockets that Memphis is going to win the game. from whatever the percentages were when you've got the ball at your own 4-yard line, up by 4 with 5 minutes left, versus being up by 11 points with 5 minutes left.
Absolutely.
Very different ball game. And just to give some more numbers and metrics to what you're talking about in regards to Mississippi State's control of the game throughout, to a certain point, 17-7 at halftime, outgained Memphis almost 2-1. Memphis only gained 246 yards of total offense in the game.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Mississippi State's defense was fantastic. Because Memphis came in the game as the number one total offense and the number one offense in the country. I believe that's in total offense, maybe, and in points scored. Maybe if one of them, if not number one, they were in the top 3 in both categories. And Mississippi State's defense completely shut them down. They only scored 17 offensive points. The other 14 points came off of a scoop and score in the first quarter on a play and during a possession in which Mississippi State was moving the ball, and then that punt return touchdown. Those are the only other 2 scores that Memphis had. Those are their 2 non-offensive scores, and if you take those 2 away, obviously the scoop and score was a freak play that we shouldn't necessarily say should be taken away. The punt return's really the only play that has a legitimate case of being taken away. Mississippi State would have won the game. Now, State, that's due in large part to State shooting themselves in the foot. They did fumble the ball, allowing Memphis to return it for a touchdown. Mississippi State had the ball. Memphis started the second half with the ball. Mississippi State got an interception deep into Memphis territory, up 10, got onto the Memphis 4, had first and goal, and got no points out of it. So you take that, which ultimately turns into a 98-yard touchdown drive for Memphis, and the home back into it, they have all the momentum in the entire world. So State, it's similar to Louisiana Tech. State nearly lost that game because they turned the ball over 4 times. Then the next week, they turned the ball over 0 times against NC State and win by 2 touchdowns. So State's offense definitely did not perform well against a very not great Memphis defense. That's definitely for sure. But at the same time, eliminate State shooting themselves in the foot repeatedly, and State wins that game by double digits. So that's the aggravating thing beyond the officiating for Mississippi State fans.
Please like the video, share these videos out on social media, because you have people that you come in contact with, of course, that don't know that we're here talking college football with you each and every day. And please subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. We got Daniel Black on the line covering Mississippi State for MSU Bulldog Blitz. Yeah, if the numbers on the offensive side, of course, jump out off the page in a Mike Leach offense, and this was typical Mike Leach offensive approach with 67 passes. But I'm going to stay with the defense since you went there in regards to holding Memphis down. If you take it all the way back to basically mid-game against Louisiana Tech, they got burned early in that game. They allowed the offense to come back by playing really good football in the second half against those other Bulldogs, Louisiana Tech. Next week, they jump out to a 24-3 lead on NC State, put that game away largely because of defense holding down a pretty formidable NC State offense, and then less than 250 yards of total offense given up to Memphis. So the defense is on a pretty good run here.
For sure. The defense is the strength of Mississippi State's team, as it was a year ago. And that goes down to defensive coordinator Zach Arnett, who, he was interviewed for the LSU defensive coordinator job, for the Oregon defensive coordinator job, Notre Dame defensive coordinator job. He was a hot commodity after his first season at Mississippi State. And that was a defense that only finished around 50th nationally in total defense. This year, the defense is much better. He runs that 3-3-5, a very, very aggressive style that loves to put pressure on the quarterback, has basically completely eliminated every single one of their opponents' run game. Louisiana Tech, I believe, had around 125 rushing yards in that first game, 59 of which were on one play, in which the defense was just completely out of position and not ready for a quarterback keeper. But yeah, Mississippi State's defense is absolutely outstanding. And the aggravating thing last year, the defense was doing enough to win 5-6 games, but the offense was falling flat on its face every single time, which meant State only went 4-7. State's offense is a little bit better this year, although it's nothing spectacular, to the chagrin of Mississippi State fans. But the defense is keeping State in these games, even though that the offense is for the most part shooting themselves in the foot. I was just alluding to talking about the Memphis game. Um, the one weak spot is that State, because they're putting so much pressure on the quarterback and having a lot of blitzes, they will occasionally get burned and give up a big play. We saw it against Louisiana Tech, but those are pretty few and far between. The big worry about Memphis's offense was that they would be able to capitalize on those big plays, even if State eliminates the run game. And for the most part, that didn't really happen. So Mississippi State's defense is one of the better ones in the SEC, one of the best quarterback duos in the entire country. So, and a great linebacking core. So Mississippi State really, it'll be interesting to see how they perform against offenses like Alabama and Ole Miss. But for the most part, they should have very little, if any, trouble against some of the offenses they'll face for the remainder of the year, even in SEC play.
As I mentioned, Will Rogers threw it 67 times, 50 of 67. So that's Mike Leach offense. Of course, 3 touchdowns, no picks in 67 attempts, despite the fumbles. They didn't turn it over through the air. Dylan Johnson, 7 carries, 49 yards. Did Mike Leach make any comments after the game regarding the run-pass ratio? That's not atypical for one of his offensive performances, but still, when they gave it to Dylan Johnson, he performed well at 7 yards per carry. Do we expect 67 attempts to be the mode going forward?
Probably so. The one thing that Leach does pretty well, and he actually did it towards the end of last year, is if he's facing a below average run defense, he will exploit it. He will be willing to run the ball. State actually, compared to normal Mike Leach performances, State actually ran the ball with some frequency towards the end of last season. They just haven't really faced a defense. Really haven't really faced a very, very good or a poor run defense so far this year. So, they haven't run the ball with much frequency. One thing that I know State fans, and I'm sure the State coaches would love to see, is fewer passing attempts, but only because they'd want Will Rogers to throw the ball more downfield instead of just having these short completions. That's why State has so many passing attempts and so many completions, is because there are so many short passes. And in many of these cases, there will be a short pass. There'll be these short passes and an occasional incompletion, and State's getting off the field because they don't hit those downfield plays. And there were plenty of opportunities in the Memphis game, plenty of wide open receivers downfield that Will Rogers either missed in the few times that he did throw it downfield, or he just checked down and didn't throw it downfield. In terms of the run game, no, we're probably not going to see much of that at all. Even in that sequence I was talking about in which State had 1st and goal in the Memphis 4, the 4 plays were pass, 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 pass from the 4-yard line. So I don't think we're going to see it with much frequency just based off of that sequence of events.
And Mekhi Polk was obviously the beneficiary of all the throws on Saturday. 11 catches for $136 and a touchdown, and Malik Heath had a touchdown reception as well on 9 catches for 88 yards. Got Daniel Black on the line from MSU Bulldog Blitz. Check out his work there. Mississippi State taking on LSU, and certainly this is an intriguing game of teams that have disappointing losses in the non-conference. LSU went out to the Rose Bowl in week 1, lost to UCLA as a slight favorite. LSU is still a slight favorite in this one, 2.5 to 3 points at Mississippi State. So I got to tell you, I have no idea what's going to happen in this one, but I will be a bit surprised if it's not a really exciting, close game.
I'm kind of with you. And, many Mississippi State people are doom and gloom right now for the fact that they lost to Memphis and now they're playing big bad LSU. So there's no way that State's going to even get close. I can see State winning this game. I don't know if I would predict it or say bet money on it, but I could see State winning it.
Sure.
And the reason why is because State has not really played quote unquote poorly except for turning the ball over and making mistakes. State played a completely clean game against NC State. Now, LSU is probably better than NC State, but they play a clean game against North Carolina State. And for the most part, they dominate them. They have a 24-3 lead in the 4th quarter, give up a garbage time touchdown, and end up winning by 14. So it's a situation where I have no doubt, based off the fact that UCLA held LSU to 27 points, I have no doubt that Mississippi State's defense is going to be able to shut them down. It's just a fact of Mississippi State's offense, which has been sluggish this year, putting up enough points. And that's been the big question for the past couple of years since that win over LSU that Mississippi State had to begin the season, in which they put up 623 passing yards and 44 points, that the likes of which we haven't seen even close to since. So it's a matter of State putting up enough points. I've only watched one LSU game this year, and it was that UCLA game. So I'm not very educated on how LSU's defense is. At least they have been the last 2 weeks. I don't think they've played anybody the last 2 weeks, though. But against UCLA, that defense looked not great. So now Mississippi State has struggled against not great defenses. But if State does not turn the ball over, if they don't make mistakes, and they do enough on offense, they can win the game. I can see Mississippi State's defense giving up only about 17 to 21 points. So if you're asked, or 14, maybe anywhere between 14 and 21. So if that's the number, State can score 24, 28 points. It's just a matter of if they will and if they play a clean game. That's going to be the key for the rest of the game. Any toss-up games from this point forward for State. So I do expect a close game. I would be willing to bet it'll be a single-digit game, maybe a little low scoring because I'm not sure how great these two offenses are. But yeah, I think that spread's pretty accurate, around 2.5 to 3. That could go either way. I think it will be an exciting game, and as long as State plays a clean game, they can win.
That UCLA game gives us any indication of LSU's rush defense. They could not stop Zach Charbonnet and UCLA at all, and we'll see if what you just stated about Mike Leach late last season in going to the run game versus poor run defenses, and also defenses that had the approach that they were going to overplay the pass in facing Mississippi State, that this may be the week to run it a little bit more against an LSU defense. Again, the last 2 weeks dominated inferior foes, but prior to that had a rough ride at the Rose Bowl against UCLA in their run game. Max Johnson has 11 touchdowns and 2 picks coming in, and Corey Kiner has been the top rusher for LSU. It's been an interesting series, of course, as these two teams go at it every year in the SEC Western Division. And Daniel took us back to week 1 last year when Mike Leach took the SEC by storm. At least they're in week 1 with an SEC record, 623 yards passing from KJ Costello, but a lot has transpired between then and now.
That's an understatement. That last part for sure. Totally different quarterback. Even in the middle of last year, some off the field chaos. It's been wild, but I guess people shouldn't expect anything less from a Mike Leach team.
Because when they showed up and did that to a defending national champion, I thought it wasn't like I was crowning Mississippi State as taking over the SEC, but I thought, okay, yeah, this is the Mike Leach air raid coming into the SEC, and they're going to win and lose a bunch of 45-42 games. That's
for sure.
The case, because then for the next 4 games, they couldn't throw the ball in the end zone. They throw it a lot, but they couldn't gain the yardage or score the points. And it was just, I got to think that hasn't happened to Mike Leach in a long, long time. To his credit, he adjusted, and it became a run heavier than he's accustomed to, and defense-oriented team that played well down the stretch and won a bowl game.
Absolutely. That week 1, I think a lot of State people were, to be honest, myself included, I could have seen State going 7-3, more along those lines than 3-7 at that point of the year. But in hindsight, obviously hindsight's 2020, LSU's defense ended up being absolutely terrible. The scheme they were running in that game was very stupid. Georgia decided to run little man against Mississippi State last year, and Mississippi State nearly beat them in Athens. So if you run man against Mike Leach, you deserve what's coming to you. And a lot of defenses just went strictly zone. And while Mike Leach has been able to get around zone defenses for his entire career, I don't know. It's probably a case of new personnel. Maybe it's the fact that last year State was starting a true freshman quarterback, because the offense the offense was, for a period of 3 or 4 games last year, at a historic low. So literally nothing could be worse than that stretch of Mississippi State's offense last year. So State's improved a little bit offensively. Yeah, from the personnel to just a true freshman quarterback being there last year, I think that's part of a big reason why State struggled so much last season.
MSU, LSU in Starkville, noon Eastern time, 11 Central, ESPN on Saturday. Should be a good one. Daniel Black, check out his work in getting all of us set for the matchup in Starkville. Daniel, we appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.